I'm sorry, sir, but our platinum class has certain standards we like to maintain. Vanessa? Palmer said, her smile practiced and poisonous as she looked Marcus Reynolds up and down, her eyes lingering judgmentally on his faded hoodie. Economy boarding will begin in approximately 30 minutes. The first-class boarding line at Gate 14 fell silent. Several passengers looked up from their phones, witnessing the confrontation. Marcus Reynolds stood perfectly still, his expression unchanged, the Atlantic Sky Airlines first-class ticket clearly displayed on his phone. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The quiet dignity with which he faced this public humiliation only highlighted the gate agent's brazen prejudice. What Vanessa Palmer didn't know, what she couldn't have imagined in her narrow worldview, was that the man she had just dismissed wasn't merely a passenger. Marcus Reynolds was the founder of Onyx Capital, a hedge fund so powerful and secretive that Wall Street insiders called him the Shadow. Over the past 18 months, he had quietly acquired 14.7% of Atlantic Sky Airlines stock, making him the company's largest individual shareholder. And with one email sent from the terminal floor where she had banished him, he would make the company worth $500 million less by morning. Have you ever been judged by your appearance rather than your abilities? Have you ever been made to feel you don't belong somewhere because of how you look? What would you do if you possessed the power to transform the very system that judged you? This isn't just a story about discrimination. It's about what happens when the person you humiliate turns out to be the one signing your paychecks. Before we dive deeper into this extraordinary true story of power, prejudice, and corporate karma, drop your city in the comments below. And if you believe in justice served with quiet dignity, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Stories like this deserve to be heard. Marcus Reynolds was a rarity in the investment world, a brilliant strategist who operated with surgical precision, yet remained almost completely unknown to the general public. At 48, he had built Onyx Capital from nothing into a $17 billion hedge fund that specialized in activist investing, taking substantial positions in underperforming companies and then forcing management changes. But Marcus was different from the typical corporate raider. He didn't just acquire companies to break them apart for profit. He saw potential where others saw only failure. His approach was methodical and visionary. He would develop comprehensive restructuring plans that would transform struggling businesses into industry leaders. The financial press called his detailed strategic proposals resurrection playbooks, complete roadmaps for corporate renewal. For the past 18 months, Marcus had been studying Atlantic Sky Airlines. Once a respected name in aviation, the airline had fallen into decline under CEO Thomas Harrison's leadership. Bloated management, declining service standards, and a toxic corporate culture had eroded both customer loyalty and shareholder value. Marcus saw an opportunity not just for profit, but for transformation. Through a complex network of shell companies and investment vehicles, Onyx Capital had quietly accumulated 14.7% of Atlantic Sky's outstanding shares, a massive $2.1 billion position that made Marcus the airline's largest shareholder, though his name appeared nowhere on public filings. His plan, codenamed Project Phoenix, was a friendly proposal to work with current management to revitalize the airline. The 300-page document detailed everything from fleet optimization to customer service overhauls. Marcus was flying to New York tonight to meet privately with two influential board members, hoping to present his vision for the company's future as a collaborative partner. He had deliberately chosen Atlantic Sky for this journey. As he always flew the airlines, he invested in observing every detail firsthand. What he was about to experience would completely change his approach from savior to conqueror. Bay Area International Airport's Terminal C stood as a gleaming monument to global commerce, its soaring glass ceiling and polished floors creating the illusion of infinite space. On this crisp February evening, the terminal pulsed with the particular energy of Silicon Valley venture capitalists, in casual luxury clothing tech executives hunched over laptops, international travelers speaking dozens of languages into their phones. Gate 14, where Atlantic Sky's flagship flight to New York was preparing to board, had been transformed into a microcosm of America's class system. A crimson carpet separated the Platinum Class boarding lane from the standard queue, a velvet rope standing as the physical manifestation of privilege. Digital screens displayed the boarding groups, with platinum illuminated in gold. Flight attendants in pressed uniforms moved with practiced efficiency, preparing for the 10:45 p.m. departure. Standing slightly apart from this choreographed pageant of status and hierarchy was Marcus Reynolds. In a sea of designer luggage and bespoke suits, he was an island of deliberate understatement. Dressed in worn denim jeans, a faded black hoodie bearing the logo of a small jazz club in New Orleans, and simple canvas sneakers, he was practically invisible, which was precisely his intention. The hoodie wasn't just clothing. It was his personal litmus test for corporate culture. In Marcus's world, the hoodie represented the divide between substance and appearance, between judging people by their contributions versus their conformity. He had worn it to boardrooms, investor meetings, and now this gate, a simple question posed without words. Will you see me or only what I'm wearing? His canvas messenger bag, frayed at the edges, contained a state-of-the-art laptop with military-grade encryption, where the future of Atlantic Sky Airlines resided in digital form. At 48, Marcus's face carried the quiet intensity of a chess grandmaster, observant, patient, and calculating. His eyes missed nothing: the gate agent's disinterest in elderly passengers, a flight attendant's barely concealed frustration, the forced smiles that didn't reach the eyes. To the casual observer, he might have been a software engineer heading to a conference or a music producer traveling to a recording session. No one would guess he controlled billions in assets, or that major corporations quaked when he took an interest in their stock. This anonymity was his most valuable asset. Marcus had learned early in his career that being underestimated was a tactical advantage. When people revealed their true character to someone they deemed unimportant, they provided invaluable intelligence. Tonight, Atlantic Sky was about to reveal its character in the most expensive lesson in corporate history. His mission on this particular flight was strategic. In his messenger bag was Project Phoenix, his vision for Atlantic Sky's renaissance, a meticulous data-driven plan to transform the airline's fleet routes, customer service, and corporate culture. He was flying to meet privately with board members Amanda Jackson and Luis Fernandez, hoping to present his case for working with current management rather than against them. His flight in Platinum Class was deliberate. He wanted to experience the airline's premium service firsthand to see if the reality matched the marketing. What he would discover was far worse than operational inefficiency. He was about to witness the ugly heart of a corporate culture in terminal decline. Marcus approached the priority boarding lane with his digital boarding pass displayed on his phone, Seat 3A Platinum Class. Before he could even reach the scanner, Vanessa Palmer stepped forward, her hand raised in a gesture that was both dismissive and territorial. Her eyes performed a swift assessment of his attire, and her conclusion was immediate. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice carrying the particular melody of condescension, dressed as courtesy. "This line is for our Platinum Class passengers and elite status members only. General boarding will begin in approximately 30 minutes. She hadn't asked to see his boarding pass. She hadn't scanned his ticket. She had looked at his clothes and rendered judgment. The behavioral protocol was clear. People who belong in first class don't dress like Marcus Reynolds. "I have a Platinum Class ticket," Marcus replied, his voice steady and unperturbed. He held up his phone, clearly displaying the boarding pass for Seat 3A. Vanessa's eyes flicked briefly to the screen, then back to his face. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Oh, I see. Sometimes the mobile app can be confusing. Comfort Plus seating is just behind Platinum class. It's very similar, just without the lay-flat beds. She was rewriting reality rather than acknowledging her mistake. She wasn't just denying him entry. She was suggesting he had misunderstood his own ticket, that he couldn't possibly have purchased a first-class seat. This seat is mine. 3A. I'm not asking, I'm stating a fact. The simplicity and directness of his response momentarily threw Vanessa off balance. Several passengers in the priority line glanced over, some with discomfort, others with morbid curiosity. Sir Vanessa's voice took on a harder edge. There seems to be some confusion. Let me take a look at your ticket. She held out her hand expectantly. Marcus passed her his phone. She made a theatrical show of examining the ticket, her brow furrowing in manufactured confusion. The boarding pass was, of course, perfectly valid Platinum class seat, 3A. This was an inconvenient fact that contradicted her narrative, so she decided to invent a new one. Ah, she said, her expression shifting to one of feigned concern. I see the issue. There's a security flag on this booking, a code 94. There was, of course, no such thing as a code 94. It was a fiction she had created on the spot, a technical-sounding term designed to justify her prejudice. That means the ticket was purchased through an unauthorized third-party vendor. For security reasons, I can't clear that here. You'll need to visit the customer service desk in the main terminal. It was a masterful lie, official-sounding, technically complex, and completely unverifiable for the passenger. She had manufactured a procedural reason to justify her prejudice. As this exchange unfolded, Marcus noticed a pattern around him. An elderly Asian couple was being questioned extensively about their visa status, despite holding American passports. A woman in a hijab was subjected to random additional screening. This wasn't just about his seat anymore. It was a systemic failure of respect and dignity. A familiar weight settled in Marcus's chest, the same quiet burn he'd felt countless times before. It wasn't shock or surprise. It was recognition. This moment of casual discrimination connected to every similar moment in his life, forming a thread of shared experience with millions of others who'd been judged by appearance rather than substance. He felt his breathing slow deliberately, a practiced response to keep his expression neutral, while his mind raced ahead, seeing not just this incident, but the patterns it revealed about Atlantic Sky's culture. I can assure you, Marcus replied, his voice now taking on a cooler tone. This ticket was purchased directly through your corporate portal. That's what the flag is for, Sir Vanessa replied with growing confidence. These third-party sites are getting very sophisticated. They're designed to look exactly like our official booking system. She was now suggesting he had been scammed further, diminishing his intelligence and competence. The line of legitimate first-class passengers continued to move past him. He had been effectively sidelined, his status as a paying customer, revoked by arbitrary decree. I would like to speak to your supervisor, Marcus stated. It wasn't a request or a threat. It was a simple declaration of intent. Be my guest, Vanessa replied with artificial sweetness, pressing a button on her console to summon her manager. The supervisor, Derek Wilson, arrived a few minutes later. Everything about him, from his slightly rumpled uniform to the bags under his eyes, telegraphed weariness and resignation. He was the quintessential middle manager, a man whose primary goal was to get through his shift with the minimum number of incident reports filed. What seems to be the problem here, he asked, looking between Vanessa and Marcus, with the practiced neutrality of someone who had mediated thousands of such conflicts. This passenger has a code 94 security flag on his ticket, Vanessa explained before Marcus could speak. He's insisting on boarding with Platinum class. Derek didn't ask for Marcus's side of the story. He didn't question the existence of a code 94. He saw a simple equation. On one side was his employee, a known quantity. On the other was an unknown passenger who was causing a delay. The path of least resistance was clear. He consulted his tablet with an air of great seriousness, scrolling through screens of information. "Sir," he began, addressing Marcus with the patronizing tone of a bureaucrat, explaining an unchangeable rule. "I see the issue here. Vanessa is correct. Your ticket has been flagged by our revenue protection algorithm. I'm sure it's just a formality, but our protocol is clear. Any flagged ticket must be revalidated at a customer service desk. It's an FAA compliance issue." He had taken Vanessa's fabrication and enhanced it, wrapping it in a thicker, more intimidating layer of bureaucratic nonsense, even invoking federal regulations for good measure. He was building a wall of procedure, brick by imaginary brick, to keep Marcus out. "That will cause me to miss my flight," Marcus stated simply. "I have important meetings scheduled in New York tomorrow morning." Derek offered a synthetic, uncaring smile. "Sir, I understand. Everyone on this flight has important meetings." Those 7 words. Everyone on this flight has important meetings were the point of no return. It was a statement of such profound dismissive arrogance that it transformed the situation. For Marcus Reynolds, this was no longer a frustrating travel inconvenience. It had become a perfect, crystal-clear case study in the catastrophic failure of Atlantic Sky's corporate culture. He looked at Derek and Vanessa, one with his practiced indifference, the other with her thinly veiled contempt, and saw in them the living embodiment of everything that was wrong with Atlantic Sky. This was a culture that had replaced service with suspicion, empathy with procedure, and respect with rigid class enforcement. His Project Phoenix paper had identified these as theoretical problems based on data. Now, he had undeniable first-hand proof. "Let me understand this clearly," Marcus said, his voice calm but carrying a new weight. "You're refusing to honor a valid first-class ticket based on a code that doesn't exist in any published Atlantic Sky policy." Derek shifted uncomfortably, sensing a level of articulate precision he hadn't expected. "Sir, I don't make the policies. I just enforce them. The system has flagged your ticket, and we can't override that at the gate." Which system? Marcus pressed. Which specific revenue protection algorithm? Is it the Maxwell system or the Thompson protocol? Because Atlantic Sky uses both, and neither has a code 94. Derek blinked rapidly, caught in a lie he couldn't defend. "Sir, I'm not at liberty to discuss our security protocols. We can't hold up a plane with over 200 passengers for one ticketing issue," Vanessa interjected, trying to regain control of the narrative. "I'm sorry, but you'll need to step aside." They had successfully used the company's own rulebook, albeit a fictionalized version of it, to enforce their prejudice. They had won, or so they thought. They turned their attention back to the gate, ready to begin general boarding, leaving Marcus standing alone, effectively barred from his flight. "Excuse me," I couldn't help overhearing. The voice came from a woman who had been working intently on her laptop at a nearby gate. Sofia Rodriguez, 33, was a financial reporter for the Wall Street Journal, her press credentials hanging from a lanyard around her neck. She had been preparing for the Artemis Financial Conference in New York, the same event Marcus was planning to attend. As she approached, memories flashed through her mind of being the only Latina in financial press rooms, of being mistaken for catering staff at industry events, of having her questions ignored while identical ones from white male colleagues were answered. She recognized the particular tone Vanessa had used with Marcus. She'd heard it directed at herself too many times. "My name is Sofia Rodriguez. I cover the aviation and investment sectors for the Journal." She approached the podium with professional confidence. "And I'm almost certain that the gentleman you're refusing to board is Marcus Reynolds, founder of Onyx Capital." Derek and Vanessa both turned to look at her, their expressions of annoyance deepening. The introduction of a journalist was an unwelcome complication. "Ma'am, as I'm sure you understand, we have a strict policy against discussing passenger identities or situations in public." Derek set his voice, a smooth, practiced deflection. "This is a private ticketing matter." Please step back." Sophia held her ground. With all due respect, it stopped being a private matter when your agent publicly accused him of not being able to afford his ticket. "I did no such thing," Vanessa protested, though her earlier behavior clearly suggested otherwise. "Mr. Reynolds is scheduled to meet with Atlantic Sky board members tomorrow," Sophia continued. "Denying him boarding isn't just a ticketing issue. It's potentially a significant corporate event. Are you aware of who he is?" Derek's face remained blank. The name Marcus Reynolds meant nothing to him. In his world, the only names that mattered were on his employee roster and flight manifest. "Ma'am, for the last time, please step away from the podium, or I will have to call airport security." The threat to call security on a member of the press was a stunning act of professional malpractice. Sophia, recognizing she could push no further without being ejected herself, took a step back, her mind racing. She didn't just have a story. She had a bombshell. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, turning to Marcus, "would you care to comment on how Atlantic Sky treats its platinum-class passengers?" Marcus looked at her with quiet appreciation. "Not at this time, Ms. Rodriguez, but I imagine we'll have plenty to discuss tomorrow." His calm response carried a note of significance that sent a chill down Sophia's spine. She had covered enough corporate takeovers to recognize the signs of imminent action. Several other passengers had begun to notice the commotion. A young tech executive who recognized Marcus from a financial conference stepped forward. "That's Marcus Reynolds," he said to Derek. "He owns more companies than you've had hot meals. You're making a massive mistake." Derek's confidence wavered for the first time. "Sir, please return to your seat. We're beginning general boarding." The tech executive shook his head in disbelief. "Your funeral, man. When this hits the financial press tomorrow, your stock is going to tank." He had no idea how prophetic those words would be. A middle-aged woman in line, who had been watching the exchange with growing discomfort, finally spoke up. "I don't know who this gentleman is, but I've been flying Atlantic Sky for 20 years, and I've never seen anyone treated this way. It's disgraceful." Her comment triggered murmurs of agreement from other passengers. The public spectacle of discrimination was making everyone uncomfortable, not just for Marcus, but for what it revealed about a company they patronized. Marcus watched the exchange with detached interest. The supervisor's casual dismissal of both a Wall Street Journal reporter and a passenger who recognized him confirmed his final diagnosis. The institutional arrogance at Atlantic Sky was so profound, it had rendered the company blind deaf and utterly incompetent. His plan to help them to work with their board as a friendly partner now seemed hopelessly naive. A company this sick could not be healed with gentle medicine. It required radical invasive surgery. It required a hostile takeover. He looked at Derek and Vanessa, who were now smugly beginning the general boarding call, believing they had successfully dispatched all challengers. He did not argue further. He did not plead. He simply gave them a short, almost imperceptible nod. It was not a nod of concession. It was a nod of acknowledgement, the kind a chess grandmaster gives when his opponent makes a final fatal blunder. "You think gates keep people out," he said quietly, almost to himself. "But sometimes they just reveal who should be let in." Marcus walked away from Gate 14 with unhurried steps, his canvas messenger bag slung over his shoulder. The busy terminal continued its rhythmic chaos around him. Announcements echoing overhead, travelers rushing to connections, reunions, and farewells, playing out in miniature dramas. He found a quiet corner against a window overlooking the tarmac, where Atlantic Sky Flight 157 to New York was being prepared for departure. Other passengers who had missed their flights were slumped in chairs looking dejected, arguing with customer service on their phones. Marcus did not pull out his phone. He did not try to rebook. He simply sat down on the floor, opened his messenger bag, and removed his carbon fiber laptop. The quiet click of the laptop opening was for Atlantic Sky, the sound of a starting gun in a race to corporate oblivion. As he waited for the secure operating system to boot, his mind flashed back to Detroit, 2008. He had just closed a successful $40 million funding round and was scheduled to present at a major banking conference. When he'd arrived at the luxury hotel venue, the security guard had directed him to the service entrance. "Deliveries around back," the guard had said without looking up. "I'm a speaker," Marcus had replied, presenting his credentials. The guard had looked up then, skepticism etched into every line of his face. "Yeah, and I'm Barack Obama." Even after showing his ID and conference badge, Marcus had been forced to call the organizer and wait in the lobby. He'd walked onto that stage 20 minutes late, facing an audience whose first impression had been colored by his tardiness. He'd delivered a flawless presentation anyway. 6 months later, he'd been invited to join the hotel's board of directors after acquiring a significant stake. His first action had been to revamp their security protocols and staff training. Then came Boston 2012. Arriving for a meeting with potential investors, dressed in business casual attire, he'd been stopped at the building's entrance. "Deliveries go through the back," the security guard had said, without looking up from his newspaper. "I'm here for the Thornton Capital meeting," Marcus had replied. The guard had finally looked up, skepticism written across his face. "Yeah, and I'm here to accept my Nobel Prize. Service entrance is around back." Marcus had shown his ID, his meeting invitation, had even called his contact upstairs. He'd still been forced to wait in the lobby for 20 minutes until someone came down to verify his identity. He'd walked into that meeting room 20 minutes late, facing the subtle smirks of old money managers who assumed his tardiness confirmed their biases. He'd secured the investment anyway. 6 months later, he'd bought the building. The first change he'd made was to the security staff. And then Chicago 2017. A first-class flight attendant had repeatedly asked to see his boarding pass, ignoring the white passengers around him. "I need to make sure you're in the right seat," she'd said. He'd complied silently, watching as she nodded with surprise upon seeing his ticket was legitimate. That airline stock had dropped 11% 3 months later, when his fund had taken a position and forced out the CEO. These memories hardened his resolve now. The discrimination he'd faced tonight wasn't unique. It was simply the most recent manifestation of a persistent pattern. But this time, he had the means to do more than change a security staff or replace a CEO. He had the power to transform an entire corporate culture. Marcus focused back on his laptop, now connected to the airport's secure Wi-Fi, through a military-grade VPN. He opened a series of encrypted folders, navigating to files labeled Atlantic Sky Contingency Scenarios. He had prepared for this moment, without knowing it would come a standard practice in his methodical approach to investment. His original plan, Project Phoenix, had been predicated on the assumption that Atlantic Sky's problems stemmed from strategic mismanagement rather than cultural rot. He had believed the company could be saved through collaborative transformation. Now he understood that the disease went much deeper than he had realized. The arrogance, the prejudice, the institutional indifference. These weren't symptoms of mismanagement. They were the company's defining features. He opened a new file and retitled it Project Nemesis Hostile Acquisition and Restructuring of Atlantic Sky Airlines. The terminal noise faded away as Marcus entered a state of intense concentration. He was no longer a passenger who had been humiliated. He was a strategic force about to reshape an entire industry. His fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced precision, updating financial models, revising tactical approaches, and recalculating valuations. The personal sting of humiliation had been transmuted into cold, clear strategic energy. He was in his element now, the momentary indignity already receding in importance compared to the systematic response he was crafting. This was no longer about a missed flight or a rude gate agent. This was about fundamental questions of corporate governance and cultural integrity. His transformation was complete. He was no longer a passenger. He was justice incarnate, about to render verdict on an entire system. Marcus began drafting a new email, the cursor blinking in rhythm with the precision of his thoughts. The recipient list was small, but contained a terrifying amount of regulatory power. The Enforcement Division of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, with carbon copies to his legal team at Onyx Capital and his personal attorney. The subject line was a masterpiece of understated lethality, notice of intent, and amendment to schedule. 13D filing regarding Atlantic Sky Airlines, NYSE ASA. To the average person, this was meaningless jargon. To the financial world, it was a declaration of war. A schedule. 13D is a form that must be filed with the SEC when any entity acquires more than 5% of a company's stock. It forces large investors to declare their intentions. Marcus's original filing made through a shell corporation had stated his intent was for passive investment purposes. This email was his official notification that his intent was changing. He began to write, his fingers a blur across the keyboard. His prose was not angry or emotional. It was precise, legalistic, and utterly damning to whom it may concern. Please be advised that Onyx Capital LP, the beneficial owner of 14.7% of the outstanding common stock of Atlantic Sky Airlines Inc., NYSE ASA, is hereby amending its Schedule 13D filing with the Commission. Effective immediately, our investment purpose is no longer deemed passive. Onyx Capital had previously prepared a private proposal titled Project Phoenix to be delivered to the Board of Directors of Atlantic Sky. This proposal outlined a friendly collaborative path toward significant value creation through operational improvements and strategic realignment. We had intended to work with the current management team to realize the company's full potential. He paused, then typed the paragraph that would seal the airline's fate. However, due to a recent direct and irreconcilable experience with the airline's frontline management, which has revealed a corporate culture of such profound dysfunction and systemic incompetence as to render our previous proposal untenable, we have lost all faith in the current leadership's ability to execute any meaningful turnaround. The operational risks and brand liabilities are, in our professional judgment, far greater than previously understood. Therefore, Onyx Capital is formally withdrawing its friendly proposal. We now believe that the only viable path to protecting our investment and unlocking shareholder value is through a complete and total overhaul of the company's management and board of directors. We intend to pursue any and all avenues necessary to effect such a change, including but not limited to a proxy contest to replace the entire board at the next annual shareholder meeting. He attached 2 documents to the email. The first was his original optimistic Project Phoenix white paper. The second was the newly titled document Project Nemesis, a case for a hostile takeover and complete management, overhaul of Atlantic Sky Airlines Inc. Project Nemesis was not merely a revision of Project Phoenix. It was a complete reimagining of Atlantic Sky's future one that began with the surgical removal of every executive and board member who had created or enabled the toxic culture Marcus had experienced firsthand. Where Phoenix had proposed gradual changes, implemented in collaboration with existing leadership, Nemesis called for immediate radical transformation. It detailed plans for replacing the entire C-suite, installing a new board with aviation and customer service expertise, restructuring compensation packages to reward frontline employee performance, and implementing a comprehensive cultural overhaul centered on respect and dignity. The financial models showed that the short-term disruption would be significant, but that the long-term benefits, both to the company's operations and its share price, would be transformative. The document was a vision not just of a more profitable airline, but of a fundamentally different way of doing business. Marcus read the email over once, his expression unreadable. He had just turned his meticulously researched plan to save the company into a weapon for its subjugation. The public humiliation at the gate had been answered with a formal regulatory declaration of war. His fingers hovered over the send button for a heartbeat, not out of hesitation, but to savor the quiet dignity of justice about to unfold. In this moment, he felt a rare sense of complete alignment between his personal values and his professional purpose. Vanessa and Derek had no idea they had just changed the course of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. "You judge by appearance," he whispered to himself. "I judge by performance. That's why I'll own this airline and you'll be looking for work." He hit send. The email carrying its payload of corporate dynamite shot from his laptop into the secure servers of the SEC. The filing would not be made public until the following morning, but the fuse had been lit. He closed his laptop, packed it back into his messenger bag, and stood up. He did not look back at Gate 14, where his flight was now pushing back from the gate. He simply walked away, disappearing into the anonymous river of the airport crowd. He had missed his flight to New York, but he had just booked a one-way ticket to the complete and total control of a multi-billion-dollar airline. The world of high finance operates on two clocks. There is the official clock of the stock market, the 9:30 a.m. to 4:00 p.m. Eastern Time trading day. And then there is the shadow clock, the relentless 24/7 flow of information, rumors, and whispers that moves through the encrypted channels and private networks of the world's most powerful investors. While the market slept, the tremor of Marcus Reynolds' email began to propagate through this shadow world. The first to feel it was the legal team at the SEC. An automated system flagged the amended 13D filing from Onyx Capital as a material event for a major publicly traded company. A senior enforcement attorney was automatically notified. He read the filing, his eyes widening. A friendly activist turning hostile on a major airline. This was huge. He knew that when the market opened, all hell was going to break loose. The attorney forwarded the filing to his supervisor with a simple note. "This will move markets tomorrow. Reynolds is going after Atlantic Sky." The next ripple reached the Wall Street Journal. Sofia Rodriguez, still seething from her encounter with Derek Wilson, had immediately filed a report with her editor on a secure line. Marcus Reynolds was just barred from an Atlantic Sky flight. She'd said, her voice electric with the thrill of the scoop. The gate staff treated him like a criminal. "I have a feeling he's not going to take this well." Her editor, recognizing the significance, immediately assigned a team to start digging into Onyx Capital's holdings. By midnight, they had confirmed through sources that Onyx had accumulated a substantial position in Atlantic Sky. By 1:00 a.m., they had a draft article ready to publish the moment markets opened. Activist investor Marcus Reynolds denied boarding on Atlantic Sky flight. Sources report hostile intent. For Sofia, this story resonated on a personal level. 6 years earlier, as a junior reporter, she'd been prevented from entering an exclusive financial conference, despite having valid press credentials. "You must be lost, honey," the security guard had said. "The hospitality staff entrance is around back." When she'd finally been allowed in after her editor intervened, she'd missed a crucial keynote address. That experience had fueled her determination to spotlight the invisible barriers that prevented qualified people from claiming their rightful seats at the table, whether in a conference hall or on an airplane. The most significant tremor, however, was a direct result of Marcus's own quiet strategic machinations. After sending his email to the SEC, he made one phone call. It was to an old trusted contact, a man named Miguel Suarez, who hosted a popular high-energy financial news show on CNBC. "Miguel, it's Marcus Reynolds," he said when the call connected. The ghost himself. To what do I owe this honor? Miguel replied, surprised to hear from the notoriously press-shy investor. I'm going hostile on Atlantic Sky tomorrow. I'd like to come on your show to explain why. There was a moment of stunned silence on the line. Marcus Reynolds, who had declined every interview request for the past 5 years, was offering an exclusive. This was the television equivalent of financial gold. What happened? Miguel asked, his journalistic instincts kicking in. Their gate agents and supervisor denied me boarding on a first-class flight tonight because I was wearing a hoodie. They created a fictional security code to justify it. When a Wall Street Journal reporter attempted to intervene, they threatened to call security on her. Miguel let out a low whistle. And this was you, Marcus Reynolds. They had no idea who I was, Marcus replied. That's the point. Their culture is so toxic, they treat anyone they deem unworthy with contempt. It's not just a customer service issue, it's a governance failure. I'm going to fix it. Tomorrow night. Prime time. We'll give you the full hour, Miguel promised. By 6:00 a.m., the financial world was fully awake and the story was spreading like wildfire. CNBC, Bloomberg TV, and Fox Business all led with the news. Social media platforms were flooded with speculation about what this meant for Atlantic Sky's future. The pre-market trading activity for Atlantic Sky's stock was frantic. The shares, which had closed the previous day at $47.25, opened for pre-market trading down 8%. By 7:00 a.m., they were down 15%. By 8:00 a.m., as more details emerged about the incident at the gate, the stock was down 22%. All of this happened while most of Atlantic Sky's management was still asleep, unaware that their company was hemorrhaging value by the minute. Sofia Rodriguez, who had barely slept, published her article at 7:15 a.m. It was devastating in its precision. Activist investor Marcus Reynolds was reportedly denied boarding on an Atlantic Sky Airlines first-class flight yesterday evening, despite holding a valid ticket. According to witnesses, gate agents questioned the legitimacy of his ticket and created a fictional security code to justify their actions. Sources close to Reynolds cite this incident as the catalyst for Onyx Capital's shift from a friendly to hostile stance toward the airline. One witness described the gate agent's behavior as textbook discrimination based on appearance. Reynolds, wearing casual clothing at the time, was told he didn't meet the standards for first class. At 7:30 a.m., CNBC announced that Marcus Reynolds would be making a rare live television appearance on Miguel Suarez's show that evening. The stock, already in free fall, dropped another 5% on the news. By the time the opening bell rang at the New York Stock Exchange at 9:30 a.m., Atlantic Sky Airlines had already lost over $400 million in market capitalization, and the regular trading day hadn't even begun. Thomas Harrison, CEO of Atlantic Sky Airlines, was awakened at 6:17 a.m. by his phone's insistent ringing. The caller ID showed his chief financial officer, Barbara Walsh. "Barbara, it's not even 6:30, Harrison mumbled, still half asleep. "Thomas, you need to get to the office right now." Walsh's voice was tight with panic. "We're under attack. What are you talking about?" "Onyx Capital, Marcus Reynolds. He's going hostile. Our stock is down 20% in pre-market, and it's still falling. There's some incident with him being denied boarding on one of our flights last night. The financial press is all over it." Harrison sat bolt upright, sleep forgotten. "What incident? What are you talking about? I don't have details yet. All I know is Reynolds was supposed to be on a flight from SFO to JFK last night, and something happened at the gate. Now he's filed an amended 13D announcing hostile intent, and he's going on CNBC tonight to talk about it." "Jesus Christ," Harrison muttered. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. Call an emergency executive committee meeting for 8 a.m. and get our investor relations team on the phone with Onyx Capital immediately." By 8:00 a.m., Atlantic Sky's executive suite was a scene of barely controlled chaos. The company's top executives sat around the polished mahogany table in the main boardroom, faces pale with shock as they watched the financial news on multiple screens. Their stock, which had closed at $47.25 the previous day, had opened for regular trading at $34.80 and was continuing to fall. Over $500 million in market capitalization had evaporated in less than 2 hours. What the hell happened? Harrison demanded, looking around the table. How did we not know Reynolds was accumulating a position? And what is this incident everyone's talking about? The head of investor relations, a young ambitious executive named Michael Peterson, looked like he was about to be sick. He used shell companies and stayed under the 5% disclosure threshold with each one. By the time he filed the 13D, he already owned nearly 15% of the company. As for his intentions, all our interactions with his team have been positive. They've been asking for data to support a friendly strategic investment. We had no idea he was planning this. What about this gate incident? Harrison pressed. We're still trying to get details, the VP of Operations Diane Martinez replied. It happened at SFO Gate 14 last night. Reynolds was apparently denied boarding on Flight 157 to JFK. We've requested the incident report and CCTV footage. Find out what happened. Harrison roared. I want a full report on every interaction we've had with Reynolds in the last 48 hours. Someone get me the names of the gate agents involved. The order sent a wave of panic through the executive suite as a dozen assistants began a frantic search for answers. They were looking in the wrong place. The answer was not in a boardroom or a financial report. The answer was in a trivial, forgotten incident report from a gate agent named Vanessa Palmer and a supervisor named Derek Wilson at SFO, a report that likely described a disruptive passenger with a ticketing issue. As the executives struggled to understand what was happening, Barbara Walsh, the CFO, cleared her throat. Thomas, there's something else you should know. Reynolds isn't just going after management. He's going after the board, too. Harrison's face drained of color. What his 13D amendment specifically states his intent to replace the entire board at the next shareholder meeting. He's already filed a preliminary proxy statement. He's got a full slate of director nominees ready to go. That's 3 weeks away. Harrison whispered the implications, sinking in. The room fell silent as the executives contemplated the gravity of their situation. On the screens surrounding them, financial analysts were already declaring Atlantic Sky. In play, the euphemism used when a company had essentially lost control of its own destiny. We need to call an emergency board meeting, Harrison finally said. Today. And someone get our outside counsel on the line. We need to understand our options for defending against this. As if on cue, Harrison's assistant entered the room with a printout. Sir, we've located the incident report from SFO, and we've identified the passenger as Marcus Reynolds. The report states he was non-compliant with boarding procedures and left the gate area voluntarily. Harrison scanned the report, his expression growing increasingly horrified as he realized the catastrophic disconnect between the anodyne language of the report and the $500 million market reaction it had triggered. At that moment, his phone rang. It was Amanda Jackson, one of the board members Marcus had been flying to meet. Her voice was cold with fury. Thomas, what the hell is going on? I just got off the phone with Reynolds' chief of staff. He says Reynolds was denied boarding last night because your gate agents didn't think he looked first class enough. Is that true? Amanda, we're still gathering facts. Save it, she cut him off. Reynolds was coming to us as a potential ally. He had a comprehensive plan to help turn the airline around. And your people humiliated him in public. Do you have any idea what you've done? Harrison couldn't answer. The final horrifying puzzle piece clicked into place. The disruptive passenger in the incident report was Marcus Reynolds. The $500 million reckoning was not a random market event. It was a direct, personal, and devastatingly effective response to the actions of two of his own employees. Just as the realization was sinking in, his private line rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. "Harrison," he answered tentatively. "Mr. Harrison, this is Marcus Reynolds." The voice was calm, measured, without a hint of anger or triumph. The room fell silent. Harrison motioned frantically for someone to put the call on speaker. "Mr. Reynolds, I was just about to reach out to you. There's been a terrible misunderstanding." "No, Mr. Harrison?" "There hasn't been." Marcus interrupted smoothly. "What happened last night wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a revelation. Your company didn't have a customer service failure. It had a culture failure. And culture flows from the top." Harrison struggled to find a response. "I want to personally apologize for I'm not interested in apologies," Marcus cut in. "I'm interested in transformation. The difference is significant. We can work together on this." Harrison pleaded, aware that his entire career was hanging by a thread. "Whatever changes you want to make." "That's precisely the problem, Mr. Harrison. The changes I want to make begin with you and your board. I'll be discussing the specifics on CNBC tonight. I just wanted to extend the professional courtesy of speaking with you directly first." "Marcus, please." "It's done, Thomas. You've been running this airline like a private club where the staff decides who belongs and who doesn't. That ends today. The annual meeting is in 3 weeks. I suggest you use that time to prepare your resignation and update your resume." The line went dead. Harrison slowly lowered the phone, his face a mask of utter defeat. "Get me Vanessa Palmer and Derek Wilson's employee files," he said, his voice a hollow whisper. "And get our legal team in here. We need to prepare for a proxy battle that we have absolutely no chance of winning." The reckoning was not just financial. It was personal. In that moment, Thomas Harrison knew his career as the CEO of Atlantic Sky was over. He had been a dead man walking for months, and two of his lowest-level employees had just signed his corporate death certificate. Vanessa Palmer and Derek Wilson arrived for their shift the following afternoon, still wrapped in a cocoon of self-righteous ignorance. They had logged the incident with the disruptive passenger confident. They had done their duty, upheld the brand standard, and protected the sanctity of their platinum-class cabin. They were sharing coffee in the employee break room, Vanessa recounting how she had saved the first-class experience from someone who clearly didn't belong. "Did you see that hoodie? Probably got it at a thrift shop." She snickered, as if someone dressed like that could afford platinum class. Derek nodded with half-hearted agreement. He'd spent the morning vaguely unsettled, the confident precision of the passengers' questions about revenue protection algorithms lingering in his mind. There had been something about the man's composure that didn't fit the difficult passenger profile. But he pushed these doubts aside. Admitting uncertainty would mean acknowledging a mistake. Their conversation halted abruptly when a woman they had never seen before entered. She was in her 50s, with a severe haircut and an aura of absolute no-nonsense authority. She was flanked by two imposing men from corporate security. Her name badge identified her as Elena Morales, Regional Vice President of West Coast Operations. "Vanessa Palmer, Derek Wilson," she asked, her voice leaving no room for pleasantries. They nodded, confused by the unexpected appearance of such a high-ranking executive. "Please come with me immediately," Elena said. It was not a request. Elena herself had been fighting battles against discrimination her entire career. She'd started as a baggage handler 30 years ago, the first Latina woman in her department, and had faced her own mountain of "you don't belong here" moments. She had climbed to her current position through a combination of exceptional competence and relentless determination. The footage she'd reviewed of Marcus Reynolds' treatment had made her physically ill. It was everything she'd fought against for 3 decades playing out in high-definition video. They were led not to the station manager's office for a routine debrief, but to a sterile, unused conference room in the airport's administrative wing. The room had no windows and smelled of stale air. On the large television monitor on the wall, a live feed of CNBC was playing, the volume muted. The screen was a sea of red, with the ticker symbol ASA at the center of the carnage. Bright, angry digits showing a 32.4% decline. Elena Morales gestured for them to sit. She remained standing, her posture rigid with controlled fury. "Before we begin," she said, her voice as cold as the polished table between them, "I want you both to understand the context of this conversation." She unmuted the television. A financial analyst's frantic voice filled the room. An absolute bloodbath for Atlantic Sky, Rebecca. "We are looking at a loss of market capitalization that is now north of $600 million, and the market has only been open for 3 hours. This all stems from the bombshell news that legendary activist investor Marcus Reynolds is seeking to oust the entire board. The question on everyone's mind is what on earth could have happened to turn a potential friendly partner into a corporate raider overnight." Elena muted the television again, the silence in the room now deafening. She slid a tablet across the table. On the screen was a high-resolution corporate headshot of a calm, intense-looking black man. It was Marcus Reynolds. "This man," Elena said, her voice a low, controlled fury, "is the disruptive passenger you dealt with at Gate 14 last night. He is the founder of Onyx Capital, and he is, as of this week, the single largest shareholder in this company. The $600 million loss you see on that screen is a direct, quantifiable result of your interaction with him." Vanessa stared at the photo, her face draining of color. The world, which had seemed so simple and orderly just minutes before, was tilting on its axis. The man in the hoodie, the man she had judged and dismissed, was the phantom power they had all whispered about in boardrooms. Derek looked like he was going to vomit his procedural certainty, and bureaucratic shields shattered, revealing the terrified, small-minded man beneath. "This wasn't about brand standards," Elena continued, her voice razor-sharp. "It was about your prejudice, and it just cost us $600 million. She slid 2 thick envelopes across the table. "Your employment with Atlantic Sky is terminated effective immediately. This is not a disciplinary action. It is an act of corporate survival. Your actions constitute gross negligence, resulting in catastrophic financial and reputational damages. Your union has been briefed and has declined to contest the termination. Corporate security will escort you to your lockers to retrieve your personal effects, and then they will escort you off airport property. You are now considered a security risk to this company's continued operation." Vanessa finally found her voice, a high-pitched, hysterical squeak. "You can't do this! I was doing my job!" He was dressed like Elena cut her off, her eyes blazing. "He was dressed like our owner, and you were too blind to see it. That is why you are fired." The finality in her voice was absolute. The personal reckoning was over. But for Atlantic Sky Airlines, the corporate reckoning was just beginning. Derek, his face ashen, stared at the envelope containing his termination papers. "I have a family," he whispered. "I have a mortgage. You should have thought of that before you invented a fictional security code to deny boarding to the man who now effectively controls this company's future." Elena replied, unmoved. "Your actions have endangered the livelihoods of over 45,000 Atlantic Sky employees. Your concern for your mortgage comes approximately 24 hours too late." Vanessa's defensive posture suddenly crumbled. The reality of what had happened, of what she had caused, finally broke through her shield of self-justification. "We didn't know," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "How were we supposed to know who he was?" Elena's expression softened slightly, not with sympathy, but with a sad recognition of the deeper truth. That's precisely the point, Ms. Palmer. You weren't supposed to know. You were supposed to treat every passenger with respect and dignity, regardless of who they might be. The fact that you only regret your actions because the passenger turned out to be powerful, that's exactly the problem Mr. Reynolds is now determined to fix. Derek and Vanessa sat in stunned silence, the full weight of their actions finally sinking in. They had not merely lost their jobs. They had become cautionary tales in corporate America, the employees whose biased judgment had cost their company $500 million in a single day. One last thing Elena said as she prepared to leave them to the corporate security team. Mr. Reynolds has made it clear in his public statements that this isn't just about him. It's about a pattern of behavior he observed throughout the terminal. So before you convince yourselves that this is just bad luck or being in the wrong place at the wrong time, I want you to really think about how many other passengers you've treated this way. Because this isn't about one incident. It's about who you chose to be every day you wore that uniform. With that, she left the room, leaving Vanessa and Derek to face not just the end of their careers, but the harsh mirror of self-reflection. 6 months later, Vanessa Palmer found herself sitting at her desk at New Beginnings, a nonprofit organization focused on career development for underserved communities. After weeks of unemployment and soul-searching, she had applied for an administrative position there, expecting rejection. To her surprise, the director, a black woman who had faced her own barriers in corporate America, had hired her, saying simply, "We all deserve a second chance to get it right." Today, Vanessa was reviewing applications for their Dress for the Job You Want program, which provided professional clothing and interview training to job seekers from disadvantaged backgrounds. As she sorted through the forms, she couldn't help but think about how far she had come from her days of judging people by their appearance. The door to her office opened, and her supervisor poked her head in. "Vanessa, there's someone here to see the program. Could you give them a tour?" She nodded and walked to the reception area, stopping short when she saw who was waiting. Marcus Reynolds stood there, dressed in his signature casual-style jeans and a hoodie. "Mr. Reynolds," she managed, her voice barely audible. He turned, recognition flickering in his eyes. "Ms. Palmer." The silence between them was heavy with history. Finally, she spoke. "I want to thank you for not using my name in the press. You could have destroyed me completely." "That wasn't my goal," he replied simply. "I know that now." She hesitated. "Would you like to see what we do here?" He nodded, and she led him through the facility, explaining their programs with growing confidence. As they walked, she found herself sharing her journey. "After everything happened, I couldn't find work for months. No airline would touch me. I had a lot of time to think about what I'd done and who I'd been." She paused. "I realized I'd spent my whole career building walls instead of bridges." Marcus looked at her thoughtfully. "And now I'm trying to help others cross the bridges I once guarded." She gestured to the classroom, where a workshop was in progress. "We teach people that their worth isn't determined by their appearance. The irony isn't lost on me." As they finished the tour, Marcus handed her his business card. "We're launching a mentorship program at Atlantic Sky for young people from diverse backgrounds. Your perspective might be valuable. If you're interested, give me a call." She took the card, stunned by the unexpected offer of redemption. "Why would you trust me after what I did?" "Because people who have learned from their mistakes often make the best teachers," he said simply. "The question is whether you've really learned." "I have," she said quietly, "more than I ever wanted to." As he turned to leave, she called after him. "Mr. Reynolds, thank you for the second chance. Not everyone gets one." He nodded once. "Make it count, Ms. Palmer." Meanwhile, in the Atlanta headquarters of Atlantic Sky, the corporate reckoning was just as brutal. CEO Thomas Harrison, after a sleepless night of watching his company's value get annihilated in overseas markets, had convened an emergency board of directors call at dawn. It was a slaughter. Victoria Blackwell, a powerful and influential board member and a former CEO herself, did not hold back. Thomas, her voice crackled over the speakerphone, sharp and unforgiving. Let me be blunt. For 2 years, this board has been telling you that your leadership was complacent, that our brand was stale, and that we were vulnerable. You assured us you had it under control. You told us your investor relations team was building a constructive dialogue with Onyx Capital. Now we learn that while you were building dialogue, your gate agents were busy setting fire to our largest shareholder. This isn't just an incident. It's an indictment of your entire leadership team. You have lost control of your company. The market knows it. Our shareholders know it. And Mr. Reynolds certainly knows it. Harrison sat in his lavish office, the speakerphone a small black box, delivering his corporate death sentence. He had spent a lifetime climbing to the top of this mountain, and in the space of a single day, he had been thrown off the summit by a gate agent in San Francisco. We have procedures for dealing with this sort of thing. He tried his voice, lacking conviction. Our crisis management team is wholly inadequate for what we're facing. Another board member interrupted. This isn't a PR crisis, Thomas. It's an existential threat. Reynolds has the votes. You know he has the votes. Every major institutional investor is lining up behind him. They see his track record of turning companies around, and they see our stock price down 70% over 3 years. This isn't a fight we can win. Harrison knew it was true. The preliminary vote counts his team had run showed that Onyx Capital, combined with the institutional investors likely to support Reynolds, already had enough shares to win any proxy contest. The math was brutally simple. The board has lost all confidence in you, Victoria. Blackwell continued. We will be accepting your resignation effective by the end of the day. We've already contacted executive search firms to begin looking for your replacement, though I suspect that decision will ultimately be Mr. Reynolds's to make. There was no debate, no discussion. The decision had been made before the call even began. Harrison was merely being informed of his fate. And what about the rest of the executive team? He asked, already knowing the answer. They'll be evaluated by the new CEO. Victoria replied, her tone making it clear what that evaluation was likely to conclude. But I wouldn't encourage any of them to make long-term plans with the company. The call ended with the clinical efficiency of an execution. Harrison sat alone in his office, surrounded by the trappings of corporate power that had, in the space of 24 hours, become meaningless. On his wall hung a magazine cover from 3 years earlier, featuring his smiling face above the headline, "The Sky's the Limit, How Thomas Harrison is Reinventing Air Travel." The irony was bitter. His executive assistant knocked gently on the door. Sir, the press release about your resignation is ready for your approval. He didn't bother to read it. Whatever it said, whatever face-saving platitudes had been crafted, the truth was already public knowledge. He had been outmaneuvered and outclassed by a man in a hoodie whom his own employees had deemed unworthy of first class. Send it, he said quietly. Within minutes, the announcement hit the newswire's Atlantic Sky CEO, Thomas Harrison, steps down amid investor pressure. The stock, which had been in free fall all day, briefly stabilized on the news. The market had expected this outcome and had already priced it in. Harrison began clearing his desk, placing personal items in a cardboard box provided by HR. 30 years in the industry, reduced to a box of mementos and a severance package. As he removed a framed photo of himself with the company's founder, his phone rang. It was Luis Fernandez, one of the board members Marcus Reynolds had been traveling to meet. Thomas Luis, said, his voice grave. I've just gotten off the phone with Reynolds. He's agreed to meet with the board tomorrow to discuss next steps. And what did he say? Harrison couldn't help asking. There was a pause on the line. He said, he's not interested in revenge. He's interested in transformation. There's a difference. After Harrison hung up, he looked around his office one last time. The view from the 37th floor showed Atlanta's skyline, with several Atlantic Sky planes visible taking off and landing in the distance. He had once believed those planes were his legacy. Now he understood that his true legacy would be as a case study in how quickly power can evaporate when built on a foundation of institutional arrogance. He picked up his box and walked to the door. As he reached for the handle, it opened from the other side. Marcus Reynolds stood in the doorway. Harrison froze, the box of belongings clutched against his chest like a shield. He hadn't expected to face Reynolds in person, certainly not here, not now. "Mr. Reynolds," he stammered. I didn't know you were in the building." Marcus's expression was unreadable. He was dressed in a simple charcoal suit with no tie, professional but understated. "I thought we should meet Mr. Harrison, one CEO to another, or rather one CEO to a former CEO." Harrison swallowed hard. "Of course. Please come in." Marcus stepped into the office but remained standing. "I won't take much of your time. I just wanted to ask you one question." "Anything," Harrison replied, desperate to salvage some dignity from the encounter. "Why did you build a company where people like Vanessa Palmer and Derek Wilson felt empowered to act the way they did?" Harrison blinked, surprised by the question. He had expected accusations, demands perhaps even gloating. Not this calm inquiry into root causes. I didn't. Their behavior was completely unacceptable. It violated our policies." "No," Marcus interrupted gently. "Their behavior was the natural result of your policies. The culture you created made their actions not just possible, but inevitable." Harrison had no response. For the first time, he was being forced to confront the reality that the incident at Gate 14 wasn't an aberration. It was a symptom. "I'll tell you what I think," Marcus continued. "I think you built a company focused on the appearance of luxury rather than the substance of service. I think you created a culture where employees believe their job is to keep people out rather than welcome people in. And I think you did it because deep down, you believe the same thing they do, that worth is determined by how someone looks, not who they are." The words hit Harrison like physical blows, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. "Now," Marcus replied, "now I rebuild your company into something better. Not just more profitable, though it will be that too, but better in the ways that actually matter, more equitable, more respectful, more human." He stepped aside to allow Harrison to exit. "Good luck, Mr. Harrison. I hope your next job teaches you what this one couldn't, that leadership isn't about corner offices and magazine covers. It's about the culture you create and the values you embody." Harrison nodded mutely and walked past Reynolds out of the office that was no longer his. The nameplate on the door would by morning bear someone else's name. 2 days later, Harrison found himself sitting in a coffee shop near his home, scrolling through job listings on his tablet. The financial press had been brutal, portraying him as the architect of his own downfall. Former colleagues weren't returning his calls. 30 years of networking, and suddenly he couldn't get past receptionists. A shadow fell across his table, and he looked up to see a man in casual clothes standing there, jeans, sneakers, and a hoodie. For a moment, he didn't recognize him without the business suit. "May I join you?" Marcus Reynolds asked. Harrison gestured to the empty chair, too surprised to speak. Marcus sat down, placing a coffee cup on the table. "I was in the neighborhood for meetings and saw you through the window." "Checking up on me?" Harrison asked, unable to keep the bitterness from his voice. "Actually, I came to make you an offer." Harrison's eyebrows rose. What kind of offer? A consulting position. 6 months well compensated. Marcus took a sip of his coffee. I want you to document every mistake you made at Atlantic Sky, every policy that enabled discrimination, every system that prioritized appearance over substance. You want me to write my own professional obituary? I want you to create a roadmap for other CEOs to avoid your mistakes. Marcus leaned forward. Your legacy doesn't have to be failure, Thomas. It could be the lessons that prevent others from failing the same way. Harrison stared at him, searching for mockery or malice and finding none. Why would you offer me this? After what happened? Because bridges are more useful than barriers, Marcus replied. And because sometimes the people who created the problem have the clearest insight into how to fix it once they actually see the problem. Harrison was silent for a long moment. Then slowly he extended his hand. I'll do it. As they shook hands, Harrison realized that Marcus Reynolds had given him something his own company never had: dignity in the face of failure. The irony wasn't lost on him. The true battle, however, was not fought in conference rooms or boardrooms. It was fought in the court of public and investor opinion, and Marcus Reynolds was its undisputed master. That evening, he walked onto the set of Miguel Suarez's financial news show, not with the swagger of a corporate raider, but with the quiet, authoritative calm of a reformer. He was dressed in a simple charcoal suit, white shirt, no tie, professional, but understated. This was a deliberate choice. He wasn't there to gloat or to play the part of the Wall Street predator. He was there to lay out a vision. Welcome to the show, Mr. Reynolds, Miguel began. I have to say, in the 15 years I've been covering financial markets, I've never seen a company lose $500 million in market cap because they wouldn't let someone on a plane. What happened? Marcus smiled slightly. Let me be clear, Miguel. This isn't about a seat on a plane. This is about a systematic failure of corporate culture. What happened to me was merely a symptom of a much deeper disease at Atlantic Sky. He never once mentioned the incident at the gate directly. He knew that would make him look petty and vengeful. Instead, he used his national television platform to deliver a devastating data-driven critique of Atlantic Sky. Let's look at the facts, he said, gesturing to a chart that appeared on screen. Customer satisfaction scores down 47% over 3 years. Employee turnover up 62%. On-time performance ranking fallen from 3rd in the industry to 14th. These aren't just numbers. They're evidence of a company that has lost its way. He spoke of inefficient fleet management, bloated executive compensation packages, and the airline's abysmal customer satisfaction scores. He presented his case with the passion of a man who genuinely believed he could fix a great American company that had lost its way. This isn't about hostility, Miguel Marcus said, his voice calm and reasonable. This is about accountability. The current management has been asleep at the wheel while this airline's brand has eroded. The shareholders have been ignored, the employees have been demoralized, and the customers have been taken for granted. My plan. Project Nemesis is not about destroying Atlantic Sky. It's about forcing it to be reborn. It's about creating a company that is profitable not in spite of its service, but because of it. It was a brilliant performance. He was framing his hostile takeover not as an act of aggression, but as an act of salvation. He was positioning himself as the champion of everyone the old guard had failed: shareholders, employees, and customers. You have to understand, he continued. When I see a gate agent inventing fictional security codes to keep someone out of first class based on how they're dressed, I don't just see a customer service failure. I see a governance failure. I see a culture that has been allowed to prioritize exclusion over service. And that starts at the top. Miguel leaned forward. Your critics say this is personal, that you're angry about being denied boarding, and you're using your financial power to get revenge. Marcus's expression remained serene. I didn't use my power yesterday when it would have been easy to do so. I didn't call the CEO. I didn't throw my name around. I simply observed and documented a systematic failure. What I'm doing now isn't revenge, it's responsibility. As the largest shareholder in Atlantic Sky, I have a fiduciary duty to protect my investment and maximize shareholder value. The current leadership has proven they cannot be trusted with that responsibility. The difference between revenge and reformation, he added, is that revenge looks backward. Reformation looks forward. I'm not interested in punishing Atlantic Sky for what happened yesterday. I'm interested in transforming Atlantic Sky for what can happen tomorrow. The interview continued for nearly an hour, with Marcus methodically laying out his vision for a transformed Atlantic Sky. He spoke of employee stock ownership plans, customer-centric service protocols, and efficient route restructuring. He discussed his slate of board nominees, industry experts, with proven track records in aviation hospitality and corporate turnarounds. I'm not just replacing a board, he explained. I'm replacing a mindset. The old Atlantic Sky believed that luxury meant exclusivity, keeping the wrong people out. The new Atlantic Sky will understand that true luxury means inclusivity, making everyone feel valued. He outlined a bold plan for diversity and inclusion that went far beyond the typical corporate platitudes. He described concrete metrics for measuring progress, leadership development programs for underrepresented groups, and a complete overhaul of hiring practices to eliminate bias. This isn't just the right thing to do ethically. It's the right thing to do financially, he explained. A diverse company better reflects and understands its diverse customer base. It innovates more effectively. It solves problems more creatively. The data on this is clear. By the time the interview ended, the narrative had been completely reframed. This wasn't a story about an angry investor lashing out. It was a story about a visionary leader stepping in to save a failing company from itself. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Atlantic Sky's stock, which had closed down 34% for the day, began to climb in after-hours trading. Financial analysts, who had been skeptical of such a dramatic move, began to issue cautiously optimistic reports about the potential value of Reynolds' approach. Social media erupted with current and former Atlantic Sky employees, sharing their own stories of toxic management and counterproductive policies. Rebuild. Atlantic Sky began trending with customers adding their experiences of poor service and arbitrary rules. The proxy battle that followed was a foregone conclusion. The major institutional shareholders, the massive pension funds, mutual funds, and endowments, saw two competing visions. One was the flailing reactive and now disgraced management of Thomas Harrison. The other was the brilliant visionary and meticulously planned future offered by Marcus Reynolds. They voted overwhelmingly for Marcus's slate of new independent board members. The annual shareholder meeting was a brief, brutal affair held in a sterile hotel ballroom. The results of the vote were read aloud. Marcus Reynolds' slate of directors had received 78% of the votes cast. The old board was officially out. Thomas Harrison, who had already resigned as CEO, gave a short, mumbled speech thanking the shareholders for the opportunity to serve. Marcus Reynolds was then nominated and unanimously elected as the new chairman of the board. He walked to the podium not with a look of triumph, but with the sober expression of a man who now had to deliver on his promises. "Thank you for your trust," he said, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "The era of excuses is over. The era of excellence, accountability, and respect begins today. Let's get to work." The rebirth of Atlantic Sky under Marcus Reynolds was a radical act of corporate re-engineering. His first official act as chairman was not to meet with his new board in their lavish boardroom. Instead, he flew to the airline's largest hub in Atlanta. He bypassed the executive offices and went straight to the employee break room in the basement of Concourse C, the very heart of the airline's frontline operations. He held a town hall meeting with over 500 baggage handlers, gate agents, and flight attendants. He stood on a makeshift stage, a baggage cart, and spoke to them not as a distant CEO, but as their new partner. "I'm Marcus Reynolds," he began, his voice carrying easily through the crowded room. "3 days ago, I was denied boarding on one of our flights because a gate agent didn't think I looked like I belonged in platinum class." A murmur ran through the crowd. By now, everyone had heard the story, though few had expected him to address it so directly. "I could have shown my ID. I could have made a scene. I could have called the CEO, but I didn't. Because I wanted to experience this airline exactly as our customers do. And what I experienced was a culture that has lost its way." He paused, looking around the room at the faces staring back at him, some wary, some hopeful, all attentive. "I'm not here to blame you. You've been operating in a system that was designed to fail. The old management believed that success came from cost-cutting, from treating customers like revenue sources rather than human beings, and from enforcing policies rather than empowering employees. That ends today." He told them the unvarnished truth about the company's near-death experience. And then he announced his first major policy change. The old management believed that "you, our frontline employees, were a cost to be managed," he declared, his voice ringing with conviction. "I believe you are our single greatest asset. That is why, effective today, I am canceling all executive bonuses for the next 3 years. That money, along with a significant portion of my own personal stock holdings, is being placed into a new company-wide employee stock ownership plan. From this moment on, you are not just employees of Atlantic Sky. You are owners." The stunned silence was followed by a wave of cautious, then thunderous applause. For the first time in years, these demoralized, overlooked employees felt a sense of hope. A flight attendant named Maria, who had been with the airline for 23 years, raised her hand. "Sir, does this mean we'll have a say in how things are run?" "That's exactly what it means," Marcus replied. "Starting next month, we're creating employee advisory councils at every hub. These councils will have direct input into everything from scheduling to service protocols. You know this airline better than anyone. It's time we started listening to you." Another employee, a baggage handler named Jamal, spoke up. "What about the dress code policing? Some of us have been written up for having our uniforms not exactly perfect while executives show up in whatever they want." Marcus smiled. "The first executive dress code policy was issued this morning. It now matches yours exactly. And as for uniform policies, they're being revised as we speak. Safety and professionalism matter. Arbitrary rules don't." One by one, he addressed their concerns, not with vague promises, but with specific plans already in motion. By the end of the town hall, the mood had transformed from skepticism to cautious optimism. Marcus's second act was to hire Sofia Rodriguez. He met with her in his temporary office, a small glass-walled space he had set up in the middle of the operations floor. "Sofia, he said your attempt to intervene at that gate in San Francisco told me everything I need to know about your character. This company needs a new story. The old story was about decline and disrespect. The new story is about rebirth and dignity. I need a storyteller who understands the difference because she saw it firsthand. I want you to be my new vice president of corporate communications." Sofia, stunned and honored, accepted on the spot. Her first assignment was to craft a public message explaining the new Atlantic Sky to the world. "I almost couldn't believe it when you offered me this job," she admitted. 7 years ago, I was kept out of a financial conference because the guard didn't believe I was a journalist. I had to call my editor to vouch for me." Marcus nodded in understanding. "That's exactly why you're the right person for this role. You understand what it feels like to be told you don't belong. And you know why we need to build something different." The centerpiece of the new culture was a training program born from the ashes of the SFO incident. It was called the Ownership Standard. Every single employee was required to attend. They learned about the company's finances. They learned about the impact of customer service on the stock price. And they were taught a simple guiding principle. Every passenger from the front of the plane to the back was to be treated as a fellow shareholder whose investment demanded respect. The training program was like nothing the airline had ever seen. On the first day, executives and frontline staff alike were required to check in for a mock flight wearing casual clothes. Half were randomly selected to be treated with suspicion and disdain by trained actors. The other half received respectful, dignified service. Afterward, they discussed how each experience made them feel and the business implications of those feelings. The true test of character, Marcus told the first group of trainees, is not how you treat people who can help you. It's how you treat people who can't. We will build a company where everyone is treated with dignity, not because they might be powerful, but because they're human beings. In the executive suite, the transformation was equally dramatic. The old guard was replaced with a diverse team of industry veterans and innovative outsiders. The new CEO, Rachel Torres, was a respected operations expert with a background in both aviation and hospitality. Her mandate was clear: rebuild Atlantic Sky from the ground up with a culture centered on respect, efficiency, and excellence. For her first week, Rachel worked incognito as a baggage handler, gate agent, and flight attendant, experiencing firsthand the challenges frontline employees faced daily. When she finally addressed the company as CEO, she did so with a deep understanding of the operational reality, not just the financial spreadsheets. Leadership isn't about telling people what to do from an office, she declared. It's about understanding what they do on the ground. It's about removing barriers, not building them. Marcus's diversity initiatives were equally transformative. He instituted a blind resume screening process to reduce bias in hiring. He created mentorship programs specifically for underrepresented groups. He established clear metrics for diversity at all levels of the company, with executive compensation tied directly to achieving those goals. Most significantly, he changed the promotion pathways to ensure that frontline experience was valued as highly as management experience. Gate agents, flight attendants, and baggage handlers suddenly saw realistic paths to leadership positions that had previously been closed to them. Within 6 months, the results were beginning to show. On-time performance improved from 72% to 91%. Customer satisfaction scores rose by 38%. Employee turnover dropped by 42%. The stock price, which had plummeted to $31 on the day of the incident, was now trading at $64, a higher level than before the crisis. What Marcus Reynolds had done was not just save a company. He had reimagined what a company could be. 1 year after the fateful night at Gate 14, Atlantic Sky Airlines had undergone a complete metamorphosis. The airline's visual identity had changed: a new logo, new livery for the aircraft, new uniforms. But the most significant transformation was invisible to the eye. It was the fundamental shift in how the company operated, how it treated its customers, and how it valued its employees. The ownership standard had evolved from a training program into the cornerstone of the company's culture. Every new hire, from baggage handlers to senior executives, went through the same intensive 2-week orientation. They learned not just the technical aspects of their jobs, but the philosophy that would guide their decisions. Treat every customer as an owner, because directly or indirectly they are. The program included a powerful symbolic element. In the main training center in Atlanta, a glass case was installed in the entrance lobby. Inside was a simple black hoodie, similar to the one Marcus had been wearing that night. The plaque beneath it read, "Never judge a book by its cover. It might own the library." It was a daily reminder of the lesson that had cost the previous management $500 million. The practical changes were equally significant. The rigid class system that had defined Atlantic Sky was reimagined. While premium cabins remained, the barriers between them became less pronounced. The red carpet was removed from the boarding lanes. The velvet ropes disappeared. The language changed from platinum class to premium experience. Small changes in terminology that reflected a massive shift in perspective. A new Dignity First initiative established clear protocols for addressing ticketing or boarding issues. Any passenger questioned about their seat assignment or ticket validity was to be treated with respect and given the benefit of the doubt. The burden of proof was placed on the airline, not the customer. Gate agents were explicitly forbidden from making judgments based on appearance, and security codes were standardized and documented. Most importantly, any discrepancies were to be handled privately, never in front of other passengers. The former practice of gate guard staff, whose primary function was to police the boarding lanes, was eliminated entirely. In its place came journey guides, employees trained to help passengers navigate the airport experience from check-in to boarding. Their performance metrics were based on assistance provided, not compliance enforced. To demonstrate the dramatic shift in approach, Atlantic Sky created a powerful training video contrasting the before and after treatment of passengers. The video showed a middle-aged man in casual clothing, attempting to board first class, first under the old system, where he was questioned aggressively and made to feel unwelcome, then under the new system, where he was greeted warmly and treated with respect. The video ended with the reveal that the passenger was an actual Atlantic Sky board member, conducting a quality check, underscoring that appearance never determines worth. Gate agents were no longer evaluated based on rigid adherence to policy, but on customer satisfaction and problem solving. They were given greater autonomy to make decisions that benefited passengers. The fictional security codes and procedural obstacles that had been used to justify discrimination were replaced with transparent, consistent policies applied equally to all. "We're not in the business of keeping people out," Marcus had declared in a company-wide memo. "We're in the business of welcoming people in. Our job is not to judge who belongs. Our job is to ensure everyone feels they belong." The new corporate headquarters, relocated from a glass tower in downtown Atlanta to a repurposed hangar at the airport, was designed to embody this philosophy. The executive offices had glass walls and were situated in the center of the building, surrounded by operational departments. The message was clear: leadership exists to serve the operation, not the other way around. Regular in-your-shoes days required executives to work frontline positions, checking in passengers, loading baggage, serving drinks. It wasn't a publicity stunt. It was a fundamental part of the new leadership approach. Understanding the challenges faced by frontline staff became a prerequisite for making decisions that affected them. The employee stock ownership plan had transformed the workforce. With 23% of the company now owned by its employees, the distinction between labor and management began to blur. Flight attendants asked passengers to stow their tray tables, not because it was policy, but because they were protecting their own investment. Baggage handlers treated luggage carefully because damage claims affected their share value. Marcus had created a virtuous cycle: employees who felt valued provided better service. Better service led to more satisfied customers. Satisfied customers became loyal customers. Loyal customers improved financial performance. Improved financial performance increased the value of employee shares. And employees who saw their ownership stake grow felt even more valued. The gate agents who had once been trained to enforce exclusivity were now trained to create inclusivity. The metrics that mattered weren't how many people they kept out of premium cabins, but how many people they made feel welcome throughout the aircraft. "The true measure of our success," Marcus told a gathering of employees on the one-year anniversary of his takeover, "is not the price of our stock. It's the pride you feel when you tell people where you work. It's the way passengers smile when they see our logo on their boarding pass. It's the culture we're building together, one interaction at a time. 18 months after the incident that had transformed Atlantic Sky, Marcus Reynolds was on a flight from Chicago to San Francisco. He was, as always, dressed in a hoodie and jeans, seated in a premium economy seat, his laptop open. He was not reviewing financial models. He was reading the raw, unfiltered customer feedback emails that were now piped directly to a special server he had access to. He was still the ghost in the machine, but now he was a benevolent spirit obsessed with the health of his creation. The transformation of Atlantic Sky had been his most challenging and rewarding project. The airline had not only survived, but was thriving, its stock price now double what it had been before his intervention, its reputation for service excellence growing. The lead flight attendant, a man named James Ramirez, who had no idea who was in seat 22B, came down the aisle. He noticed Marcus's laptop and the intense focus on his face. "Burning the midnight oil?" Sir James asked, with a friendly, genuine smile. "Something like that," Marcus replied. "Well, you look like a man who could use a coffee," James said. "It's on the house. Thank you for flying with us. We appreciate your business." He returned a moment later with a hot coffee. It was a small gesture, a trivial act of kindness in the grand scheme of things. But for Marcus, it was everything. It was the data point he had been looking for. It was the proof that the culture had truly changed, that the $500 million lesson had been learned. He took a sip of the coffee, a quiet, satisfied smile on his face. The flight attendant had treated him with respect and warmth, not because he recognized him as the company's chairman, but because that was now the Atlantic Sky way. The transformation was complete. Later in the flight, Marcus requested a blanket. James brought it promptly again with that same genuine warmth. As he handed it over, his eyes briefly flickered with recognition. "Mr. Reynolds?" he asked quietly, uncertain. Marcus nodded with a small smile. James straightened, momentarily flustered. "Sir, I had no idea. I should have—" "You should have done exactly what you did," Marcus interrupted gently. "You treated me like a valued customer. That's all I've ever wanted this airline to do for anyone who flies with us." James relaxed, understanding the deeper meaning of the exchange. That's the first thing they teach us now. Everyone deserves respect, not because of who they might be, but because of who they are. "And how's that working out for you?" Marcus asked. James's face brightened with genuine pride. "Honestly, it's transformed the job. I used to dread coming to work. Now I look forward to it. When you're not constantly policing people or enforcing arbitrary rules, you can actually focus on making their experience better." Marcus nodded. "That's exactly the point. When we remove the barriers between people, we create the space for genuine human connection." Just then, a commotion erupted several rows ahead. A passenger was arguing loudly with another flight attendant about overhead bin space. Marcus watched carefully, curious to see how the situation would be handled under the new Atlantic Sky protocols. The flight attendant, a woman named Tanya, listened calmly to the passenger's complaint. Instead of citing policy or escalating the confrontation, she offered a solution. "I understand your frustration, sir. Let me check if we can find some space in the front cabin for your bag. In the meantime, would you like a complimentary drink while we sort this out?" The passenger's anger visibly deflated. By the time Tanya returned with both a solution for his bag and the promised drink, he was apologizing for his outburst. James, who had been watching alongside Marcus, smiled. 2 years ago, that would have ended with threats to call security and a formal incident report. Now, it's just another problem solved. The difference, Marcus observed, is that we've stopped seeing passengers as problems to manage and started seeing them as people to serve. As Marcus watched this unfold, he noticed another passenger, a few rows ahead, A young black man in casual clothes, perhaps in his early 20s, being served with the same respect and attention as everyone else. The young man was dressed almost identically to how Marcus had been that fateful night. Hoodie jeans, sneakers. Yet his experience was completely different. "That young man," Marcus said quietly to James, nodding toward the passenger. Would he have had trouble boarding Platinum class under the old system? James followed his gaze and understood immediately. Almost certainly. He would have been questioned, possibly redirected to economy. The system was designed to exclude people who didn't fit a certain image. And now we don't see clothes. We see customers. We don't build barriers. We build bridges. James smiled. That's the phrase our new CEO uses in every training session. Barriers or bridges? Which are you building today? Marcus nodded, pleased to hear his metaphor had become part of the company vernacular. As the plane began its descent into San Francisco, the very city where this story had begun, Marcus felt a sense of completion. The hostile takeover, born from a moment of profound disrespect, had achieved its ultimate goal. It had not just created a better airline, it had created a better way of doing business. The story of Marcus Reynolds and Atlantic Sky Airlines quickly became a case study taught in business schools across the country. Harvard Business Review published a comprehensive analysis titled "The Reynolds Reformation: How a Moment of Discrimination Transformed an Industry." Stanford's Graduate School of Business created a course on corporate culture change, using Atlantic Sky as its central example. The impact extended far beyond the airline itself. Other carriers, watching Atlantic Sky's dramatic turnaround, began to re-examine their own cultures and practices. Delta introduced a new training program focused on unconscious bias. United revamped its customer service protocols. Southwest expanded its employee ownership structure. Marcus was invited to speak at industry conferences, not as an investor, but as a visionary. His message was consistent and clear. The most valuable asset in any service business is the culture. It's the only thing your competitors can't copy overnight. Wall Street, initially skeptical of such a focus on soft metrics like culture and employee satisfaction, couldn't argue with the results. Atlantic Sky's financial performance had outpaced the industry, with operating margins 40% higher than its nearest competitor. The stock price had tripled since Marcus took control. Employee turnover had dropped to the lowest in the industry. The company's diversity initiatives were particularly transformative. Within 2 years, Atlantic Sky had the most diverse leadership team in the industry, with women and people of color holding 58% of senior positions. This wasn't just good optics. It translated directly to improved decision-making and innovation. The airline introduced industry-first services, specifically designed for previously underserved passenger groups, from expanded accommodation for travelers with disabilities to culturally sensitive meal options. But perhaps the most significant legacy was not in the numbers, but in the stories. Former customers who had sworn never to fly Atlantic Sky again returned, drawn by reports of the airline's transformation. They shared their experiences on social media, creating a virtuous cycle of positive word of mouth that no advertising budget could have purchased. One viral post came from an elderly woman who had been helped through a complex connection by a gate agent who stayed an hour past his shift to ensure she made her flight. Another came from a father whose daughter's teddy bear had been left on a plane. A flight attendant had personally delivered it to their hotel that evening. These were not corporate directives. They were the natural expressions of a workforce that felt valued, empowered, and invested in the company's success. The most unexpected story came 18 months after the takeover. A local news station in San Francisco ran a piece about a former Atlantic Sky gate agent who had found a new calling. Vanessa Palmer, after losing her job in the infamous incident, had spent 6 months unemployed and reflecting on her actions. She now worked for a nonprofit that helped disadvantaged youth prepare for job interviews, focusing specifically on overcoming bias in hiring practices. I learned the hard way that judging people by their appearance isn't just wrong, it's destructive, she told the reporter. I'm trying to use that expensive lesson to help others avoid my mistakes. When asked if she resented Marcus Reynolds for what had happened, she shook her head. He didn't ruin my career. My own prejudice did. He just held up a mirror. The reporter then revealed a surprising twist. Marcus Reynolds had become a major donor to the nonprofit, though he had never publicly connected his support to Vanessa's employment there. When asked about this connection, Marcus simply said, "People who've learned difficult lessons often make the most effective teachers." This quiet act of reconciliation, supporting Vanessa's redemption without seeking credit, spoke volumes about Marcus's true character. It wasn't about revenge or even justice. It was about transformation, not just of companies, but of people. 3 years after the Gate 14 incident, Atlantic Sky launched a groundbreaking initiative called Open Skies, a comprehensive program designed to make air travel more accessible to underserved communities. The program included subsidized fares for first-generation college students, dedicated mentorship for aspiring pilots, and aviation professionals from disadvantaged backgrounds, and partnerships with community organizations to provide travel opportunities for those who had never flown before. At the launch event, Marcus revealed that the idea had come from an unexpected source: Thomas Harrison, the former CEO, whose consulting work had evolved into genuine advocacy for change within the industry. Marcus Reynolds himself maintained a low profile. He rarely gave interviews and deflected personal credit for the transformation. "I didn't change Atlantic Sky," he would say when pressed. "The people of Atlantic Sky changed Atlantic Sky. I just removed the obstacles that were preventing them from being their best selves." The real legacy, he believed, was not in creating a better airline, but in demonstrating a better model of capitalism. One where shareholder value and human dignity were not competing interests, but complementary forces. In a rare interview with the Wall Street Journal on the 2nd anniversary of his takeover, Marcus reflected on the lessons of the Atlantic Sky story. "A company's culture is its most valuable and vulnerable asset," he said. "In our hyper-connected, transparent world, a single act of prejudice, once a private injustice, can now trigger a public and financially devastating reckoning. The ultimate form of karma is not just revenge, but radical systemic change." The story of Marcus Reynolds and Atlantic Sky Airlines is a stark and powerful illustration of a modern truth in our hyper-connected world. No act of discrimination happens in isolation. What was once private is now public. What was once ignored can now go viral. And the person you disrespect today might just be the one signing your paycheck or your corporate death certificate tomorrow. It's a lesson in the true nature of power. Marcus didn't just get 2 employees fired. He didn't just force out a CEO. He took over an entire company and rebuilt it on a foundation of respect, demonstrating that the most devastating response to discrimination isn't anger, it's transformation. This story resonates with so many of us because we've all experienced moments when we were judged by our appearance rather than our abilities. Have you ever been dismissed, overlooked, or disrespected based on how you look rather than who you are? How did that experience change you? What would you have done if you had Marcus's power to transform the system? What do you think is the strongest connection between how customers are treated and a company's financial success? Have you ever chosen to stop doing business with a company because of how you were treated? Share your experiences and insights in the comments below. If this story of high-stakes drama and ultimate karma resonated with you, please hit that like button, share this video with your network, and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the consequences of actions in our complex world. Remember, respect isn't just the right thing to do, as Atlantic Sky learned the hard way. It's also good business. Thank you for watching.